Did you know that you can transform ordinary napkins into stunning home decor with just a few easy steps? Let's dive in. Welcome to my channel. Today we're exploring a simple and creative fall decoupage napkin art idea that will elevate your home decor this season. For today's project, I'm going to be using a 9x12 canvas. Now this has already been pre-traced for another paint party, so as a surplus, I'm going to be decoupaging and painting right on top of it. I'm also using a napkin, and I have gone with a fall motif or fall themed napkin. You need a Mod Podge and a brush to apply it. You can use a chippy brush or you can use a foam brush. I'm going to be using a sanding sponge and I'm going to be using a pair of scissors and paint. This napkin has 2 plies and I only need the top layer. And what I do next is I take this and I scrunch it up. It adds texture to the canvas and it also hides the folds on the napkin. I'm going to set that aside for a second. And I'm going to apply a layer of Mod Podge to my canvas. I'm only applying Mod Podge to the top. I'm not doing the sides at the moment. The Mod Podge that I'm using is gloss, but you can use matte or satin. Now we want to apply our napkin. Now you can use a piece of scrunched up plastic wrap or even some plastic gloves if you want in order to smooth out the napkin. But in this case, I'm just using the discarded ply from the napkin. So I'm just going from the center out, and I'm really not going to be fussed with any of the wrinkles that I might get. Again, it's just going to add some more texture to my pumpkin painting. So I'm going to let this dry for a few minutes. Meantime, I'm going to take my scissors and I'm going to remove some of the excess napkin. Some sides have about 3 or 4 inches. So I'm just going to keep 1 inch for the edge and just remove the excess. Okay, so now I'm going to apply the Mod Podge to the edges of the canvas. I'm not going to worry about the corners as of yet. I'm gonna let this dry and then I'm gonna come back and deal with the corners. For the corners, what I do is I apply a little bit of Mod Podge to the short end of the canvas, right at the corners, and then I fold the napkin like we do when we're gift wrapping. So the decoupage is fairly dry. So the first thing I'm going to do is remove the excess napkin from the edges. And I'm going to use a sanding sponge. And on the edge, I'm just going to rub the sanding sponge down in a downward motion, and it really comes off super easy. If you don't have a sanding sponge, you can use a pair of scissors and trim it as close as possible to the edge. The thing about decoupage is if you tear it for some reason, you can always take a piece of the discarded napkin, take a little piece, and Mod Podge right on top, and no one will know. I'm actually going to be teaching this little project at a local long-term care residence next month, and I think the residents will really appreciate the different background as opposed to painting in the background which they're used to doing. Okay, so now we're going to apply the layer on top of the decoupage, and this will get the canvas ready for our painting. The nice thing about this project is you can use a canvas that was painted previously. All you need to do is put a layer of white paint on the painting, or a dark paint, depending on your napkin you're going to use. And let that dry, and then do this process. I'm just doing the edges as well. And I'm just going to let that dry. Then we can start with our painting. To draw the pumpkin, you can draw it on a piece of paper and then use a piece of graphite underneath to trace it onto your canvas, or you can trace it directly on your canvas. I'm going to use a Sharpie just to show you how I drew my pumpkin. I started out by drawing out an M, and then I started with an oval, and continued building on the pumpkin, and these are called ribs. I'm going to draw out the stem. You can make as many ribs as you want. Every pumpkin is different. And there you have it. I'm starting with the color Buttermilk to base coat the pumpkin. Next, I'm going to use black and I'm going to paint in the stem of the pumpkin. I'm using the color Laguna to add the first layer of color to the pumpkin. I will be using a 1/2 inch brush for most of the details. Next, I'm taking some True Blue and mixing it with a little bit of buttermilk and applying the next color to the pumpkin. Let's add some bright orange here and there. I'm mixing a little bit of the bright orange with some white to create some lighter highlights to the pumpkin. I wanted to add a little bit more depth to the pumpkin, so I went back in with the bright orange. To create some highlights for the stem, I mixed a little bit of the black and white. I also used the same color to start adding some shadows around the stem. And then I added a few highlights with white paint. I created a shadow underneath the pumpkin with the white and black mix, and then went in with a little bit of the black. It's now time to outline the pumpkin. I use black paint and a liner brush, but you can certainly use a Sharpie for this step. I wanted to play with the background, so I added my own leaves. And I also used the existing leaves on the napkin and embellished them. This is where you can be so creative. You can add different colors, different designs. It's really endless and it's lots of fun. So I used my liner brush and black paint, and then I added dots and swirls. You can spend hours just adding more and more details. It is really fun to do, and you should try it. To add a little bit more highlights to the pumpkin painting, I used a fork and some white paint and just created some highlights. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Thanks for watching.